Good evening, everyone. Welcome tonight to the Virtual Ice Fishing Fest. We're very excited to have Jason Mitchell and Matt Johnson here tonight with us from Clam Team. It's going to be an action-packed night. We've got a ton of questions coming in already, which is fantastic. Keep those questions coming in. We've got a $5,000 prize package given away tonight from the Clam Team. It's going to include all sorts of fun stuff. We'll get into some more of that nitty-gritty details later on tonight. Please make sure you've registered. If you have not already, if you're tuning into YouTube or Facebook, the current web address is, I just had it there. It is SCHEELS.com/Ice Series. Make sure you get registered on that one so you qualify for the prize package. So my name is Ben Fleischhacker. We're going to get going. Right now I do all the product development for SCHEELS Outfitter and SCHEELS branded items. We're very excited for 21 coming up here. We got some great prize coming in the springtime as well as the fall, so please keep tuned for that. And we'll kind of jump in. We've got Jason Mitchell here staring at me right now on the camera, so I'm going to pick on him first. Welcome tonight, Jason. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to do this. I know you've been out fishing. I mean, social media's been blowing up with you already, so appreciate all the feedback you've been giving out there on that. But if you would kind of give us a little bit of your background. I mean, for anybody that doesn't know who you are.
Well, yeah, I have to joke and disclaimer, I've tried a lot of things that don't work, but, I started guiding at a young age. I was 20, 21 years old when I started, and by the time I was 22, I was making a living full time doing it up on Devil's Lake here, and I did it for, goodness, 15 years. And then about 10, 12 years ago, I had the opportunity to get in the television business through Tony Dean, who had, he was on TV for 25 years for, people that are a little older that remember that. And we've been going strong on television now for 12 years, and, the industry is continuing to change. We've got television, used to be broadcast television, then it switched to cable television. Now, we're doing stuff like this. And so, the industry's changed, but, the basics haven't, helping people catch fish, motivating, encouraging people to get out and fish. Beauty of fishing is that anybody can get out and do it. Anybody can get good at it, and so that's why we do what we do. We love fishing and we love people.
Very good. Thank you. Matt, you there?
I'm there.
Perfect, Matt. You mind giving us a little bit of your background too?
Absolutely. Kind of like Jason, started guiding at a young age. Went to college and realized I could make a little more money guiding people instead of hanging clothes or flipping burgers. So I started guiding when I was 19 years old in college and never looked back, and loved teaching people, getting people involved in the sport. And like Jason said, there's really no wrong way to do it. You go out there, you go fishing, have some fun, and your smile is your smile, and what your goal is every day is something you can put at it, and it's exciting.
That's great. Now, would you say you're more of a bass angler?
In the summertime, yeah. I mean, I guide on Lake Minnetonka, and you kind of have the bass fish out there. It's worldly known, but
Yep.
In the wintertime, I catch them by accident, but they're fun to catch in the winter too.
Oh, yeah. Very good. All right, well, let's jump in some questions here. We've got Bradley, excuse me. Very generic question here, which is going to be great because it's going to leave it open to all states here. But if you have to pick your favorite lake to fish, what species would it be, and then what lake? Pick on Jason here.
Oh boy, don't ever make me pick. I love it all. I mean, it's funny because every week, no matter where I'm at, I'm at one of my favorite places doing one of my favorite things, and the next week I say the same thing. So what does that tell you?
Yeah, you like to fish.
I love it all. I mean, I love ice walleyes. I love shallow walleyes. And then I go lake trout fishing and think, oh man, I love lake trout. And then I catch a big bluegill, like, oh, I love panfish. I mean, I hope I never, ever have to pick. It's like picking a favorite kid. You can't, at least in front of them.
There you go.
I love it all.
Very good. Is there a certain region you like more, Jason?
Wherever they're biting.
Spoken like a true fisherman.
And I love being by myself, and so whenever I get to really remote places where I feel like I'm traveling back in time, and I'm the only idiot out there. And when you drive into town, like, what are you here for? What are you doing? What's that big trailer for? Oh, yeah, I'm here to fish. You came all the way here to fish? And they look at you like you're crazy. I love those places.
Yep.
Because you're the only one out there doing it. And so I love exploring. We strike out at times. I mean, there's been rabbit holes we've gone down, lakes we've gone to where we probably won't go back for a while, but that's all part of the adventure. It's just the journey.
Mm-hmm.
I love trying stuff, experimenting, drilling holes in places where maybe they don't have a lot of fanfare, a lot of recognition. I love going down roads less traveled if I can.
Very good. Matt?
Yeah, I'd say I'd echo what Jason said. I mean, depending on the year or even the month, I'm going to tell you a different body of water or a lake I like to fish. And now that my kids really got involved in ice fishing, we've grown and built memories together. So we've done trips to Lake of the Woods, we've done trips to Devil's Lake out there with Jason, and we fished some local lakes. But like Jason said, I'd say honestly, my favorite lakes are the ones where we stumble across a bite or a pattern that we had to really work for, one that didn't exist. And it may be off the beaten path, and bang. But if I had to give you a one, to me, it probably is, this is different from most, catching catfish through the ice on the horseshoe chain. I still love doing that. And it turns anyone that hasn't done it, it will change the way you ice fish, and it's fun to do. So that's one I really enjoy.
Something different.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Very good. All right, so now we got a question coming from Talon here. It's in regards to snowmobile and ATV ice fishing. What are some of the aftermarket rigging systems, for your actual machines? What do you guys recommend? Where do you find them? Where do you use? I mean, outside of being, in someone's garage with a metal shop or something, I mean, there's a lot of different examples out there. What do you guys end up doing?
Matt, you want to answer, or should I?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of brands out there that make some quality stuff. I mean, you have to jump into the ATV realm, and there's not a ton of, I'd say, ice fishing specific brands that we're probably accustomed to endemically. But there are, you can find some out there. If you jump into ATV shops, you might have a local one that sells whatever brand. You'll see some, lack of a better term, apparatuses that go on the back of an ATV for a bucket. I know Excel Outdoors used to make some of those products. You can find stuff that each manufacturer, whether it's Arctic Cat, Polaris, you go down the list, they make some of their own, independent products that they have their label on. Mm-hmm. And like you said, though, fortunately or unfortunately, I know at Clam, if you look at our machines, it's all done in-house. We have fabricators in-house that are bending conduit and welding things. And the unfortunate thing is every machine's different. There's no consistency. So you really have to customize things. And that's probably the best way to do it, is to find a good buddy that can weld or has a welding machine. Bring him a walleye dinner because he just caught it, and see if he can fabricate some stuff on your machine. And that's probably the most foolproof way to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're going to have to build it yourself or customize it with a welding shop. And one thing I'd tell you is, if you're going to go through a lot of bush, for example, and portage between lakes, narrow trails, you don't want your auger rack, for example, pointed behind you, lined up with your sled. If you're out on the wide open, I recommend having it in front of you across your sled so that you can see it. Okay. Your electronics, your tackle boxes, your rods, you want to make sure that that's on your machine and not getting towed behind, because whatever's in that tub is going to get banged up and beat up and vibrated in a bad way. And so mount your GPS front and center on your handlebars where you can see it just like when it's in your boat. Hardwire it to your battery. Don't use a cigarette plug-in because you're going to lose it when you're bouncing across the ice. And so hardwire it into your battery. Run a second battery. A lot of cases, if you're running a lot of electronics off your machine, especially these ones that have electronic ignitions with no pull start, when you're dead, you're dead. You need jumper cables, a buddy to come over to help you. Mm-hmm. And so have a second battery if need be. Your rod racks and everything. A lot of people will mount a tub in the back. That way they can put another tub for a one man. And even if you don't use that one man, you put your Vexilar, if you have a free Vexilar. Some people are running Panoptics, whatever. Tackle boxes, anything that just because especially on a snowmobile, especially with your tackle and stuff, it's gonna be a lot smoother ride. It get everything off the ice.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, kind of going in line with that too. How much ice do you guys recommend? I mean, not only for the machines out there. I mean, there's generic stuff out there, and this is personal preference for you guys. And the second caveat to that question, coming from Nicole K, is how much ice should there be for an individual to be going out fishing? The part of the question is how cold does it have to be to trust the ice won't break, and that's kind of a different question. Depends on the time of year. I mean, I've been ice fishing with T-shirts on before, vice versa, with a parka that you can't move in. So, Jason, you want to take this one?
Well, the biggest thing is if it's early ice, if it's questionable ice, always have a spud bar. Okay, just a big heavy metal bar with like a chisel tip, and you pound the ice hard as you walk in front of you. And with one good hard pound, you're going to break through about 2-3 inches of ice with that spud bar. And if water doesn't come up, you've got 2 to 3 inches of ice, which will hold or support, your average adult. Okay. And obviously if it's late ice, that's a completely different animal when it's soft, when it's spongy, but usually early ice, it's clear. Even these temperatures right now, we're getting these 40, 50 degree days. The sun's so low that where I'm at, we're still making ice during the day. You drill a hole and 3 hours later, the hole's froze over. It's got ice on it. At night, the lakes are booming. Okay. It's making ice. And so the sun's so low right now that 40 degree day, it doesn't really do much to destroy the ice like a 40, 50 degree day does in April, because the sun's so much higher and the days are so much longer. And so always have a spud bar. And, the general consensus is, you need 3 inches of good, clear, hard ice to walk on. Okay. Some people will tell you less, but that's, there's always some crazies out there. I would recommend 3 inches. That's a lot of ice to support you. And especially if it's clear ice, even look at the cracks as you walk so you can gauge the thickness and carry that spud bar and pound as you go. Because the thing is, there could have been geese sitting in that spot, 3 weeks earlier that they could have kept it open. There's a big difference between 1 inch and 3 inches. There's no gray area there, right? And so 3 inches is good to walk on. You just have to make sure that it's still 3 inches. And don't assume anything. I'll see 4 or 5 people on a 4-wheelers out on 6 inches of ice, but there might be an area where there's 3 inches, and a guy sees the people sitting out there, they just drive right to them and park right next to them, not even knowing how much ice there is. Don't take other people's decisions or judgment and just assume that makes it safe. Check for yourself. Do your own diligence, especially this time of year. And so 3 inches for walking, 6 inches, 7 inches for ATVs, some of the smaller, lighter side-by-sides, and then generally 12 inches for driving a vehicle. I personally like 14 inches. I mean, I've fallen through before. It's terrifying. It's scarier and harder to get out than what a lot of people joke about. And that was when I was 20 years old, right out of basic training. I was in the best shape of my life, and I had all I could do to get out. And I know for a fact that most people aren't in that good a shape. When I'm 45 now, I know I'm not nearly the man that I was then. And so it's nothing to joke with. It's nothing to compromise, but at the same time, if you use some common sense and take some precautions, ice fishing is like the safest, funnest thing you can do. You just, don't be foolish. So.
Yep. Very good. And then how about safety? When you're checking ice, if you're going out there and you think there's 2, maybe 3, 4 inches, I mean, what do you guys have for safety equipment with you? Are you going by yourself? Do you always have the buddy system?
Try to have somebody with you, but a throw rope is a big thing, even if it's just a rope in a boat cushion. Clam makes a throw rope that fits in a bag that you can throw it out. Lift suits, or even nothing else, just wear your life jacket. Ice cleats are a big thing because the ice is slippery. The reality is you're probably more likely to slip and fall on your head or take a bad tumble, especially if you drill a hole on glare ice and it gets slippery. I would say more people fall and get hurt than they'll ever fall through. So wear a good pair of ice cleats. What else? Ice, the chisel's the most important thing. Don't go out there without a chisel. Flotation, ice picks that you wear around your neck. Just they hook together around your neck. That way, if you were to fall through, you can pull yourself back out. It is hard to get out, because the biggest thing is you got to get almost horizontal, and that gets cold and wet. And it's just your natural reaction not to get horizontal and wet, because it's hard to. It's like pulling yourself out into a boat, right? I mean, that's the type of, that can be how hard it can be if your clothes get weighed down. And so, float suit, picks. Even if you don't have a pick, just have a screwdriver in your pocket, just something that you can use to get out. And, let people know where you're at. That way, if something happens, people know to look for you.
Yep. Very good. All right. I'm going to combine 2 questions here with one. This one's talking about for most of your jigging with any bait, do you use just minnow heads? Do you use the full grub? Do you use the full minnow? And I'm going to kind of tie that into with the Tikka minnow. The Tikka minnow question was, do you tip it with bait? So double-faced question. I know, Matt, you got a Tikka minnow in front of you, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was tempted to eat it just here on camera. I fish it without bait a lot of times, and I'm generally not a big bait angler. I'm using plastics if I'm pan fishing, or silkies and Tikka minnows and spoons if I'm walleye fishing. And, this type of bait, I think, can get that impulse strike. You can work it in a manner to where walleyes want to come in and they want to crush it. Now I'm not saying you're not going to have those days where, your Vexilar is your mood indicator. When a fish comes up and they stop and put the brakes on and you watch that mark change, you may have to entice them with a piece of meat. But I'm always starting any application, whether it's a Tikka minnow, a spoon, a plastic for a panfish, without bait. And I'm trying to get that aggressive fish out of the school and then I let how that school dictate the bite future. So I'd say I'm usually fishing it without bait, getting after it. I'm pretty aggressive on how I fish. I want that active fish out of the school, and then I see what the fish do from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it depends on where you're at as far as when you're looking for fish, for example, you're just trying to cover a lot of water. Not only are you making moves to cover that water, but you're also fishing so that you can cover water by pulling fish into you from further away, okay? And so a lot of times when I'm looking for fish, I'm fishing aggressively, not just with my rod cadence as far as the stroke, but also, going from hole to hole, spacing my holes apart. And I just want to find signs of life. I want to mark fish. I want something to stop me or slow me down. And what I find is when I'm the first person on those spots, when you're looking for fish and you're fishing new water and you're the first people, first auger to drill over the top of those fish, you're going to get a few fish that meet you halfway that are just going to make you look good no matter what you do. Okay. And when you can fish aggressively, say when you can rip that lure and then rip it again, and then a fish shows up and then bring it up 6 inches and bring it up another 6 inches. And by the time it gets to you, just boom, the rod tip just loads up. You don't need bait on that type of a bite. When you get that acceleration, you get that fish to rise in the water column. By the time they get to you, they're so wound up that they just eat it. Okay. Now, after you wear out your welcome, you catch those easy fish, you catch those fish that make you look good. Well, guess what? If you're going to stay in that same spot and pick over what's left, you might have to bob that treble hook. You might have to slow it down. You might get that fish to raise hard and then stall. And then you might get them 3 inches and they're nose to nose with it. And you know what? It's like, I can't catch fish on a slip bobber without live bait, right? In the summer, we all know that gulp works. We all know that soft plastics work or whatever. But if I were to take a gulp crawler and put it on a slip bobber and let it sit there, I wouldn't have very good confidence. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so that's the way to think about it, is when you have to get more passive, more subtle because of those fish that aren't wound up, that's when the bait stuff starts taking over. So it's a progression. You start out maybe no bait, you catch those fish, or you find the fish with no bait by fishing that way, and then you wear out your welcome, and then to catch a few more, you might have to have a minnow head. And guess what? You get to where you can't get fish to lift on that anymore, and pretty soon you're getting some on a dead stick. And so that's kind of the progression, the spectrum from aggressive to passive, if that makes any sense.
Very good. And they kind of even go into that passive with the dead stick. We got Chuck R. Then he's specifically asking you here, Jason. Sorry, Matt. You're important to me. Don't worry. But with Jason, what is your go-to fish if you want to go out for a couple hours and just sit? If you're not looking to run and gun, just looking to hang out.
It so depends on where I'm at or where I'd be living. Okay. When I take my kids out, for example, when they were really little, it was a train wreck where if we went an hour where one of them didn't put their foot and leg down the hole, that was a good day. Okay. And I could only take them out one at a time because they'd be fighting with each other, And I remember my wife and I renting a fish house one time, and we got a pizza and we would bring kids cartoon movies out there, and we didn't last an hour. Kids are both soaking wet, minnows all over the floor of the fish house. I mean, it was just, and so it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to do. And if you're like, for example, I take my kids out pike fishing, where we'd sit in the truck and put tip-ups out, and it was comfortable. We were warm, flag would go up, and we did a lot of things wrong some days and caught fish. As far as the hook set, bringing the fish in, whatever. On another lake, say you're in Fargo, it might be a bluegill lake in Detroit Lakes, where you just want to be able to walk out 50 yards, drill a hole along a weed line, and do something as simple as sight fish in 5 feet of water, where you can just see these 6-7 inch bluegills come in, and let a kid experience that and just get hooked.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on where you're at and what you're doing. But there are so many basic, simple things to do to get into ice fishing. And even if you've done a lot of ice fishing, you just never get tired of it. And it could be pike fishing with tip-ups. It could be panfish. It could be walleye bites on some fisheries. There's just so much out there. So, I'd have to get more specific answer, question to give a more specific answer. But there's a lot of good stuff out there to do.
Absolutely.
Easy stuff.
Very good. Okay, we've got a pile of beginner questions here, and so let's try to look at and to kind of group them together. So what is the basic equipment? For if somebody really wants to get into the sport without spending a lot of money, I mean, it's one thing that we've seen in 2020, through the chaos of everything, is the actual recruitment of new fishermen or people that have not been fishing for a while now getting back into it. And so one thing at SCHEELS that we've been seeing is just a total increase of sales of all the equipment. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you have an unlimited checking account, you can buy whatever you need to, and you can buy all the fun toys. But for a person that's just looking to get into it, what are some of the basic necessities that you know what, you need to have this in your arsenal. You know, whether it's jigs, whether it's rods, ice scooper, you know, do you need a power auger? Can you get away with just a hand auger? I mean, in general, what would you guys say? This is a question for both of you. I like both of your guys' perspective.
Sure, I can start off. I mean, I always like to tell people if you're not warm and comfortable on the ice, you don't want to be out there if you're getting into it. So proper clothing is important. And some of that stuff you may already have at home, whether it's a long underwear, base layer, things like that. But having a warm suit, having a good pair of boots, having a good pair of gloves, a hat. I learned any new client I take on the ice fishing on a guide level, if they're not dressed appropriately for a day on the ice, they don't want to do it again. So good warm clothes, you know, having a good ice suit, something like that. Pop-up fish house. The hub house market right now, in my opinion, is gold. You don't need to break the bank. So if you're getting into the sport and you want to take, like Jason referenced, his wife and a couple kids out fishing, you can get into a good pop-up for a few $100 that will house the entire family or you and 3 of your buddies and stay comfortable and warm. So hub house is a big one. You don't need a power auger. I mean, they can come in handy, but you can use your cordless drill in your garage right now to cut a hole in the ice. That's what a lot of us are doing. They chuck up to that clam drill plate. It's convenient, it's portable, and then you can use a hand auger bit and you're not spending hundreds of dollars. Rods and reels, man, that's an open-ended question. Really depends on what you find yourself doing. So if you want to target panfish, if the handful of trips a year you want to go out on is going to be bluegills and crappies, then yeah, you want to scale it down and match the rod and reel to the fish you're targeting. If you say, I'm doing 3 ice fishing trips a year, I'm going to Mille Lacs, I'm going to Lake of the Woods, I'm going to Red Lake, whatever it might be, then you might want a walleye setup. So, you know, rods and reels can get all over the place. My advice would be a medium light combo. That allows you to do a little bit of everything. You can fish bluegills and crappies and perch, and you can do a lot of walleye fishing with the medium light combo. You can kind of get the best of both worlds. And then from there, you kind of figure out what you want to do. And that's what I tell people the most is get out there, try it out, see what you like, and you're going to find the niche that you want. You're going to gravitate towards panfish, and then you're going to go crazy with noodle rods and spring bobbers and the tungsten jigs and all the fancy stuff. Or you may decide, hey, I'm gonna chase perch, I'm gonna chase walleye, and you may shift that other direction towards, you know, stronger line types and different lure applications. So, but for me, you have to be comfortable on the ice. If you're cold on the ice, which is not an excuse nowadays with what we have available, then you don't want to do it. So wear the proper clothing, layer up, have the stuff on you, on your person, so that you can be out there and use what's on you as your fish house to stay warm for a day of fishing. That's probably the biggest tip I'd say for beginners and get into it is proper clothing. It doesn't matter what rod or Vexla or auger you have. If you're cold and you don't want to be out there and you're miserable, you won't do it again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, I think you can get by with surprisingly little amount of equipment. Okay. I remember as a kid, you know, we didn't have hardly anything. I remember getting standing on top of a bucket, you know, with a hand auger and just taking forever to drill a hole, and you'd finally drill it and you wouldn't go anywhere because it took so much work, you know. And then having a gas auger didn't work, and going out and driving over to the lake, knowing full well I could never ever get my gas auger started, and then pulling on it in front of a bunch of people so that everybody could see that my auger wouldn't start, and then walking over to somebody like a black lab looking for a snack, hoping that somebody would drill a hole for me. And guess what? A lot of people did, you know. And so that's the thing. I always, you know, I see single parents, for example, all the time at seminars and stuff where be like mother will come up to me wanting to get her kids out fishing. You know what? You know, especially like, you know, I'll use Fargo as an example. You know, you get over to Fergus Falls, Detroit Lakes area. There's so many great panfish lakes, and we'll just talk panfish because that's easy. It's something that will hook anybody. And you can get, you know, every lake has got a hole where you'll see 10, 15 hard-sided fish houses in the wintertime. And chances are, if you're friendly and you approach some people and ask for some knowledge and help, a lot of people will help you. You know, they'll tell you what they're catching. They'll tell you some basics, how that, you know, 20 feet of water, 10 feet down, 12 feet down, whatever it is. And the other thing that I tell a lot of people is look for clear water lakes. Okay, look for lakes that are really clear, because what that enables you to do, if it's an option, every part of the country is different, but if you can find some small panfish lakes that have really good water visibility, you can check that information out on the DNR websites as well, the SCHEELS disc readings. Say if it's 10-foot readings, 12-foot readings, clear water, you can walk out on the ice, especially early ice when you're walking out, see where the weeds are frozen in the ice, get right past on that outside edge of those frozen weed beds. You're on the outside edge of that weed line, drill a hole, and I guarantee you can be in blue jeans and a sweatshirt, pull the hood over your head and look down and see bluegills show up within 10 minutes. And I tell you what, I remember being 6th grade and laying on the ice, soaking wet, freezing, but I couldn't pull myself off the ice and I couldn't stop looking because I was just infatuated with it. If there's a way to hook kids or hook somebody new, it's just get a hole drilled over some clear water where you can sight fish and watch these bass come in. These big pike will come rolling in and they'll be fanning their pectoral fins and all of a sudden, they'll hit it. And I mean, it's just addicting, and so that's something I tell a lot of people to do is get in an area where you can sight fish. It doesn't take a lot. Like Matt said, you can buy a hub. It doesn't, just starting out doesn't even necessarily have to be an insulated hub, just something that'll keep you out of the elements. Over time, you're going to get hooked. Maybe your neighbor's got a old buddy heater or a Mr. Heater or something you can borrow. You take the barbecue or the propane tank off the barbecue grill. You'll patch things together and make it work. But just to get started, it doesn't take hardly anything. Once you get hooked, you can add things. You might need to, okay, I'm going to get a Vexlar now because when I get past that weed line, I can't see them anymore, and then the next thing is, okay, I'm going to put an app on my phone for a GPS. Then over time, that ain't good enough anymore. I need to have a GPS on my 4-wheeler. That stuff will all come, it'll all come. And you've got your whole life to put it together and add it. And that's what makes it fun is every year you buy something fun to add to what you do, right? And make it easier and better. But getting started, you can get by with so little to get hooked, and to catch fish. The fish don't look up and care, if you have a $10,000 4-wheeler or what you have. And the other thing too, for rods, you can have a cheap rod with a spring bobber and catch every bluegill in the lake.
Yep.
That's the reality of it. And so take that to heart too. So.
Yeah. I grew up in Nebraska for the most part, and our ice fishing, I mean, some days it was a week, or some years. Some years, it was a couple days to a week. Sometimes it was a couple months. But I mean, when I first started seeing hubs on the ice, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the craziest thing in the world, because we just grew up sitting on a bucket, with the rods that are, $10, and it's, you wind the line on it by hand. It's not even like a reel by any means. But
we all started out there. We used to build our own 4x8 portables with blue tarps and 2x2s that would go across the roof. And I haven't seen one of those on the ice in 20 years, so
I built
we started for pretty humble roots.
Yeah, I built a wood box for my Vexlar in 9th grade shop class instead of a clock. So, you gotta start someplace. I still got that wood box. I still got that Vexlar. It sits in the laundry room.
That's awesome. That's perfect, because the next question is going to be on electronics here. What are your guys' favorite electronics, and what's your thoughts on the Panoptics?
Well, I can take it. I mean, I think I'm a Vexlar guy. I really believe in the analog signal, the broadband signal. The reason being is that it details movement so good. Okay, when fish change their body posture, a lot of times they'll kind of cock themselves and their fins change. Even if that signal doesn't go up or down or move or do anything, it'll flutter. And that movement tells you whether those fish are responding and like your presentation or whether they don't. And the other thing is it enables you to look in weeds better and look into the bottom better if you have a blind spot in your cone angle. And so the real time, that raw analog signal on a Vexlar to me is it's king. It's why so many people use a Vexlar, use a flasher. Digitized signals work, it shows you a line, but it doesn't give you that type of detail or that type of information. I think there's a time and place for Panoptics, which basically it's a different type of sonar where you put the transducer in the water and you can scan with it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what it's really shown me is that fish move around a lot more than what I ever envisioned, when you can see them moving, and so you can scan, and where it really shines in my mind is, say, if you're over a bowl and there's crappie suspended, instead of drilling 20 holes to find those fish, you can drill 3 or 4 or 5. You can narrow it down a lot quicker. But what you find is that the fish are still moving around. They're basically swimming in a circle, like Finding Nemo. They're just, they're not staying in one spot. And so you still have to drill your grid of holes. You still have to bounce from hole to hole. And I think most people agree that use Panoptics, once you find the fish, you still go back to your Vexlar to catch them. But the Panoptics is just a tool to narrow down the chase and help you find them. Just like a GPS mapping is an important tool as well, where you want to have that map. That's another tool that narrows down your search, as far as finding edges, finding transitions, and finding and understanding structure. So it's another tool that complements, your sonar. So.
And even, to the GPS and the lake contour maps. I mean, this is, I guess, question 1.A or whatever, but what do you guys look for when you're looking at new body of water on that? We got the electronics, you know, whether it's going to be the digital or the analog style. But when you're looking at the contour maps, what are you guys looking for on new body water? If I was to say, hey, the Sandhills in Nebraska got this really hot, you know, farm pond going on, you got to go knock on this person's door, but they're going to let you in there. It has been graphed, you know, 15 years ago. What do you guys look for on those?
I mean, I look for changes in contour, and sometimes some of the things that are the most abrupt to you, there's fish on them. I think sometimes we overthink this way too much. We think we gotta go someplace completely different, change the game. But sometimes looking at the most obvious piece of structure, if I'm looking at my Navionics app on my phone or whatever, if my GPS on my quad, and I'll look for differences in sometimes subtle changes. If you're fishing a farm pond, like you said in Nebraska, sometimes a 2-foot divot makes all the difference in the world. Something to stop that fish, because what happens is, you know, those depth ranges, not only do the fish hold to them, but they hold to them because the sediment's different. There might be an insect bloom at 9 feet instead of 7 feet. And we've seen it so many times where I'm catching fish in one spot, my buddy's 10 yards away, not catching nothing. And the differences could be in depth. So I'm looking at that sort of stuff. You know, I'm really doing my research. Jason made a great point earlier in this presentation about going to your DNR website and doing the research. If I want to catch bluegills, I want to go to a lake that's got good bluegills in it. So if I can take away some of that guesswork ahead of time by checking out the DNR website and looking at the gill nets and some of those things, some of the research that they've done, I can alleviate that right away. And biggest thing too is doing your homework the day before you hit the ice. I mean, I'm not telling anybody to go back to school by any means. Well, some of us have done enough of that, but you can plan your day of fishing before you hit the ice. The worst thing you want to do is pull up to the edge of that ice and look out there and go, what am I going to do today? Where should I start? Oh boy. I mean, I better do that stuff the night before. And we have these tools literally in our pockets. You know, I have one in my pocket right now called a cell phone, where I can literally sit and look at that app the night before. Jason and I can sit down over a burger the night before we go fishing, or even that morning at you know, when we're talking, and do the homework, do the research, and hit the ice and be ready and prepared. That's something I think too many anglers do not do. They go out there to look at the big group of fish houses and they go, I'm going to go by them. They must be catching them. But I'm telling you, as a guide in the metro area of Minnesota, that's never where the best fish are. That's never where the biggest fish are. And if you're going to sit and put by those people, you better be ready to catch fish at windows of time, and that's it. Otherwise, you're staring at your Vexilar. Get off the beaten path, do it on your own, and don't be afraid to cut holes. They're efficient nowadays. Don't be afraid to cut holes. Don't be complacent. You wouldn't throw an anchor in the boat and make the same cast 400 times in a row for 5 hours. Why would you do it through the ice? So mobility, get up after it and chase them down.
Very good. All right. And again, everybody that's tuning in right now, please make sure you guys are registering for the event on YouTube or Facebook. It's scheels.com/ice. Let me scroll that up again real quick to make sure I got the right website. Yep, Ice Series, /Ice Series. And when you do this, it automatically enters you into the $5,000 prize package that Clam has provided to us, which is extremely awesome. Appreciate you guys doing that. All right, so now we got a loaded question here. Not saying that none of these have been loaded yet, but for the best tactics, what would you guys say, you know, taking a look at the season of the ice? So early season, mid-season, late season. What are you guys' ice tactics for walleye? And we'll just talk about the upper Midwest.
Yeah, I'll start. I think no matter what time of year, be the hunter and be the first person to find fish. Okay. It doesn't matter what time of year, they're a lot easier to catch when you're the first person on them. Okay. By the time a crowd gathers, the bite's over. Okay. By the time you see 10 pickups idling over 7 feet of water on a great walleye bite where they bit last week, I can guarantee you they're not going to bite this week. Okay. And so don't chase reports. Find fish. You know, you're going to strike out at times. You know, you're going to, you know, check some spots that disappoint you. But to get the best fishing, you got to be the hunter. You got to be the first person on spots. I can't stress that enough. And so that has to be your overall theme. And then just trying to stay one step ahead of it. Like right now, we're catching a lot of fish shallow along shoreline structure, shallow structure, whether it's flooded road beds, shorelines that have some hard bottom, basically the old shoreline when the lakes were lower. And it's 5, 6, 7 feet of water, that gradient. And you know what? We catch fish for 2, 3, 4 days and we start to wear out our welcome. It gets tougher. And then people gather, you know, people figure it out. There's other people around and the bite just goes downhill. And well, you know what, you got to be on the new spot. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to find other spots that are like that, but in different parts of the lake that just people haven't got to yet or haven't figured out how to reach, because there's a pressure ridge and you got to get around the pressure ridge. And, you know, so you just try to stay one step ahead of people. And then we'll be out on the main lake more where, you know, we'll be, say we're catching them on a point and it's 15 feet of water and it's rock. And then that spot gets beat up and you try to get to the next thing, you know, and you just try to stay one step ahead. Just be the hunter, be the person looking and drilling holes and looking for fish. The fewer the people, the better. If I can get to a part of the lake and I know there's 5 or 6 good spots in that area and there's no tracks, I'm excited. You know, I mean, I can't stress how important that is. It's simple, but it's just, I don't know, some people don't have confidence in their abilities, or they just want to. I even have friends that were like that, you know, that you go out fishing summer or winter. Well, have you ever caught them here before? No, I've never even seen this place before. Isn't this awesome? They want to turn around and go home. You know, like they're wasting their day. They don't fish unless there's a fishing report. You know, you got to just tune that out. You just got to go fish and you got to look for fish. And if you do that and just that's your habit and that's what you do, you'll be the person that everybody's following.
And I've fished with Jason many times, and I can tell you, Jason's the hunter. It's something to admire. He chases fish down. I remember one day on Leech Lake, Jason probably remembers this day, I couldn't cut holes faster than he could catch them. Every time I look back, there's a fish by each hole. No, he nails it. I mean, and I also think a lot of anglers, when it comes to walleye fishing, tend to fish too deep. I think they're always thinking, I got to go deep. I got to get out on the rocks. I got to get on the mud flats. I got to get on this or that. And I think oftentimes these fish, you know, these walleyes, they move up to feed. And the one thing you always got to remember, walleyes are going to feed more at low light periods. So if you're a guy or gal that likes to sleep in or hit the bar early, walleyes might not be your species. You may want to target bluegills and something else and tip up for pike, because you got to be up there when the sun comes up. These fish make these shallow movements. You got to be on them. And I also like to do the 1-2 approach. And this has helped me catch and find fish, where I will tip up fish, let's say the break line, and I'll jig fish up shallower or vice versa. But I always cut an extra hole by that tip up. And I do that because once that flag goes off, oftentimes that first bite that we catch here in the cities, down in Twin Cities area, that flag goes up first. And the last thing I want to do is cut holes at prime time. So I always cut secondary holes right by my tip ups. So if the flags start going off, let's say in a break line, me and my clients can slide out and we can fish those holes that are already cut. So I always try to vary my depths, but I think a lot of anglers oftentimes, like I heard Jason mention many times already, how it's shallow oriented walleyes. I think we drive over some of the best fishing spots in the winter constantly. And that's not just walleye fishing, that's bluegill fishing, that's crappie fishing, that's everything. I think a lot of anglers drive right out to the middle of the lake because they think they have to be there to catch the fish, and you just went past some of the best spots.
Yeah, and to add to that too, you know, getting back to being the first person on the spot, the GPS and mapping has changed everything. Okay, in some ways I wish we could travel back in time before Lake Masterchip. You know, it used to be where I had all these waypoints in Devil's Lake that were worth something, that meant something. Took years, took a whole lifetime to find. Now anybody with $120 can buy that knowledge. And so with that being said, everything that's obvious, everything that jumps out to you, everything that looks good on a lake map that's offshore really gets a lot of attention now because it's so obvious. It's just like a magnet, okay? You look at Lake of the Woods is a good example. It used to be where if you took a snowmobile out to Staring Shoals or Night, or some of those reefs way up north, I mean, you get there and nobody could find them. Only a few people had the waypoints, and when you got on those spots, it was automatic that you caught fish. Okay, now you're driving out there, and as you get closer, you just see all these specks of fish houses, and you're looking at your GPS, like, oh, that little point's got fish houses, that little finger's got fish houses, this little, everything that looks like a squiggle on your map has got fish houses sitting on it, And so, yeah, the first people catch fish. Yeah, it's still a good spot. It still produces fish all winter, but it's not the same. And now guess what? Like even on places like Lake of the Woods, some of our funnest, best bites are inshore. They're shallow. They're less than 10 feet of water, morning and evenings. Same thing on Devil's Lake, Leech Lake, 5 feet of water. These shallow patterns, it's like the last secret left where everybody goes to the offshore stuff that looks good on a map, and the stuff less than 10 feet isn't mapped very well because it's so subtle. It's a sand ridge with a little bit of cabbage and maybe 4 or 5 rocks in a line. And it's the subtle stuff inshore that gets overlooked, and some of the best fishing across the board on a lot of walleye water.
So what does your guys' preseason scouting look like? I mean, when you guys are out there open water fishing your boats, are you kind of doing a pseudo
It never stops. It's like deer hunting. You're always trying to find a way to get into that person's property or getting permission. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if you're eating breakfast. It doesn't matter if you're at the grocery store. It doesn't matter if you can, get permission to hunt one more good spot and have one more good deer stand. It's year round.
Oh yeah.
I'm marking
It never
spots.
stops.
I mean, we're marking spots on our GPSs. I mean, I would say after every guide trip, I spend some time marking a spot that looks productive. And we're in our boats, through the entire month of October and even part of November. And we're marking spots that look good because if you, like Jason said, those shallow water spots are generally not marked as well on like a Navionics chip. So you find those inside turns, you find, small boulder fields, you find gravel, you find whatever, variance in weed type. And I'm marking
My
that.
favorite is a trough or an inside turn. You get an
Absolutely.
inside turn or a trough, and that's golden. That's dynamite for
Yeah, you
shallow
find a
water.
trough in a shallow weed flat. If I got a weed
Yep.
flat and it's 10 feet and there's a trough in that thing, I call them corridors. They're gold. And I'll be honest, some of those spots I don't even guide on just because they're so precious. They're so, you can harm those spots and they're always so close to shore. I mean, a lot of times you can throw a football to those spots from shore.
Yeah.
And at least where I guide, there's 100 anglers on every spot every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be mindful of that sort of stuff. So, but yeah, I know Jason nailed it. And just driving from the cities to Fargo today, like Jason said, you're always looking for that next bite. My wife's watching and she knows how annoying it is. I even got my kids trained. When we drive by a body of water, the first thing we say is, think there's fish in that? What do you think's in there? How much ice is out there? So that's just the way our brains are wired now. I shouldn't say now. We're not obsessed. We're possessed. It's just the nature of the game.
Yep.
That's a good way to look at it. All right. Lots of questions in regards to live bait versus artificial bait, along with the silky. So what would you guys say?
I've been absolutely obsessed with the silky the last week. I fished it hard last week. We tested it last winter, and it's one of those baits, to be honest, that at first glance, you look past it. You don't think it's much anything. You think it's another gimmick, and I totally get it. But once you start to fish it and see that you can catch 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 fish on one bait, you can manipulate it a half a dozen ways. It's something these fish have never seen before. I think you're going to see a lot of anglers that add it to their arsenal. You got to try it. I'm not telling you to go out there right now, and I work for the company at Clam. I'm not telling you to go out there and spend $100 if you don't have confidence in it right now. But get a couple packs, get out there, play with it when the fish are biting, because you have to have confidence in a bait. It's when the fish are biting, you put that in your head that it works. I'm telling you, it's magical. We caught a pile of fish last week on this: bluegills, crappies, bass, perch, you name it. I know Jason's been crushing fish on it. I think you were catching them today, weren't you?
Yeah, and I'm still using the same silky. I mean, we just filmed an episode here, and I don't know how many. I must have caught at least 30 fish on one silky. And the beauty of it is that, you look at crappies and bluegills in particular, they're eating so many bugs, they're eating so many invertebrates, insects in particular, back swimmers. You see them in your hole when you drill a hole. And it's kind of like what a woolly bugger is to fly anglers. Woolly bugger looks like a lot of different things depending on how you fish it. Kind of like a tube jig. A tube jig looks like a lot of different things. If you're on Lake Erie, it might be a goby, right? If you're somewhere else, it might be a cisco or a crawfish. It's one of those baits that looks like a lot of different things, a lot of different insects, and it's different than it's more durable than hair. It's more durable than synthetic or marabou. It just, and the more fish you catch on it, the more beat up it gets, the more it works. It's almost like I don't know if you ever noticed, if you ever use marabou jigs for like smallmouth, is that a lot of times you pull out some of the feathers on them and they work better. After you catch a bunch of fish, they work better because it's like they put all these feathers on them to make them look good in the package. They get all fluffy and puffy. And then after you catch about 30 fish on them, that's really when it comes into its own. The silky is like that in the sense that the more beat up and chewed up it gets, the more it works. And I think it looks like a back swimmer. I mean, I would just putting on a single spike. I don't think you'd have to tip them all the time. And so, in getting back to the basic question, plastics, silky or live bait, talking panfish, a lot of times I like to start out with big profiles. I like to start out with plastics. Reason being is that they can see it from further away. I can pull fish to me, and I can cover water that way. And I can get fish to accelerate and lift up in the water column. And to me, that's the key to catching big fish. is that a 14-inch crappie could be swimming around with 10-inch crappies, and it could be right in the mix in a pack of 6-inch bluegills. But I guarantee you that 6-inch bluegill ain't going to leave the safety of the pack 3-4 feet higher than the pack. Okay, there's only one fish in that pack that'll do that, and that's the biggest one. The biggest fish will leave the security of the crowd and chase down that bigger. And the further they can see it, the further you can lift. And that's how you separate fish by size. Sometimes is using those big profiles and forcing those fish up and fish high. And so a lot of times I like to start out with soft plastics. I use soft plastics whenever I can get away with it. There are times, however, where, you know, and I've heard people say, well, I don't ever use live bait. I don't have to use live bait, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, if you fish enough water on enough days, you're going to also see situations where the people that are using a wax worm, for example, are going to clean your clock. You know, especially like, say, heavily pressured lakes where it's really a finesse bite and you can't get the fish to accelerate. When the window is, say, 3 inches, 4 inches, you can't get the fish to climb. You can't get the fish to raise. And you can't get the fish to respond to hard cadences and hard motions where you have to basically dead stick it and hold it still and let the fish slowly pedal up. They suck and spit, suck and spit, suck and hold, and then suck again, and then you set the hook. You can't get away with that with soft plastics. Devil's Lake's a great example of this. Devil's Lake, you're going to struggle catching perch in 40 feet of water on soft plastics. Now, there's days where it happens. I've done it some days. I've been, you know, and especially the shallower you get, the more you can do it. But I think what it is in that deeper water, when you, every once in a while, the water's clear enough and the sun's at a nice enough angle where you can see with an underwater camera that deep. And what happens is those fish will come up and then they suck it in. And a lot of times you imagine when the fish suck it in, that's when the rod tip dunks. That's not the case. It's almost disappointing. I don't care if you have a $500 ice rod. When a perch sucks it in 40 feet of water, unless you give the fish slack and see the slack, you don't know it's there. And what happens is that fish will coast forward. And as it coasts forward, that's the dunk. Okay, that's when the rod tip dunks. Mm-hmm. And what happens is there's a competition factor on a really good bite. You've got 3 perch competing against each other, and they're side by side. One sucks it in again, and pushes ahead to get away from the rest of them. And that's the hard bite, the boom, right? And on a really tough bite, that perch just sits there and sucks and holds, okay? Or sucks, spits, and holds. And that's the really tough bite where it's a brain surgery bite where that rod tip barely moves. And if you even imagine a bite, you set the hook, okay? Those are the different types of bites you encounter. And I think what happens is when you get that type of bite, those fish just don't do it with soft plastics. They might come up to it, they might pedal up to it, and they might kiss it, they might suck and spit, but it's not good enough to stick them, okay? And so there's definitely times where you have to use soft plastics to find fish. There's definitely times where soft plastics give you an edge. There's a lot of different options and profiles and colors and all kinds of different things that make soft plastics great. But at the end of the day, there's also days where if you leave live bait at home, whether it's spikes, wax worms, whatever you like to use, you know, you're in trouble. So that's the honest answer.
Appreciate that. Friendly reminder as well as we're getting ready. We got 13 minutes before we got to cut it off. And the crazy thing is that there's 7 pages incoming still of questions.
Well, we're going to answer them all too after this too, so let people know that we're going to gang up and go on, and we're not going to leave anybody behind. So
appreciate that, guys. And for the audience tuning in right now, Jason and Matt have agreed already for tomorrow for probably 9 hours tomorrow to answer all these questions coming in. Because I know, Jason, you got a bunch of questions coming up on your social media page. Matt, you were saying the same thing.
The disclaimer is about 10 o'clock in the morning when I get back from walleye fishing.
There you go. Hopefully everybody tuned into that as well as that little tip for timing to go out. But make sure you guys are registered on SCHEELS.com/ice series to make sure you're registered for tonight's prize package. Let's go here. Let's see if we can't get a couple more questions. Fishing tactics in clear water versus stained water. I think this is a good one, you know, depending on zebra mussel or depending on the water itself, I guess, the body water. But what do you guys see for your tactics change?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it really varies on the depth I end up fishing, to be honest. You know, clear water versus dirty water. I mean, yeah, I might change up some of my approach in terms of the lure I'm fishing, whether it's a natural color, a flasher color, glows. But I find myself generally fishing shallower when it's dirtier water. You have the weed growth will be shallower at that point. In clear water, you can have deep weed growth still. And I think oftentimes as ice fishermen and anglers, we don't think that weeds grow under the ice. Oh, but they do. And they grow well. And I can tell you a lot of fish still relate to the weeds during the wintertime. So lakes like Lake Minnetonka back home where I guide, and one of them, we got zebra mussels all over the place. And you'll get deep weeds. You get weeds in 16, 18, 20 feet of water in the wintertime. And sometimes you got to be down there and in them versus another lake 10 minutes away from Minnetonka, you may find a lake that's dirty and stained, and I'm fishing bluegills in 6 feet of water. So to me, really dirty versus clear dictates the depth of water I'm generally targeting, how much light penetration comes through, all that sort of stuff. Then you think about how thick is the ice, how much snow's on top of that ice. Those things are all important. And then from there, you start throwing lures at them that maybe have more flash, that have some noise, rattle spoon, something with a clacker blade, something that swims a little more, those sorts of things. So you have to take that stuff into account. But me, when it comes to dirty versus stain, I'm more worried about the depth I'm going to fish than probably what I'm going to throw at them. Because I think, again, we oftentimes overthink these fish. You present a bait in front of a fish, you got to be where the fish is at. It's got to move and act like something that they'd eat, and they'll eat it. I'm not a big guy that thinks about the color of the lure. That's probably 4th or 5th on my list. I want to be at that right depth. I want to be where these fish are, and I want that bait to move in a way that these fish want to feed on it. So I don't know if that's consistent with something Jason's finding, but yeah, we have a various types of lakes where I'm at. We have 4-inch visibility, and we have 15-foot visibility, all within a half an hour of my house in the cities. So you got to adapt and move, and pick your times of day, your window bites too. There's a lot that goes into it, depending on the clarity of the lake, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head. You're better. You can do a lot of things wrong in the right place and right time. And a lot of times people worry about the wrong things. They get so, oh, do I need white Wonder Bread jig with blue eyes or red eyes? I mean, by that point, it don't matter, right? I mean, you're in the wrong spot if it does, okay?
Right.
You can do some things wrong in the right place at the right time. Now, one thing I would add to that is if you do have stained water, dirty water, it's definitely more of a daytime bite. It could be the middle of the day, it could be the best time. You're not going to have as good of weeds. A lot of times you might not have weeds or good weeds deep, and the weeds are going to die a lot more quickly, okay? And so that's going to push fish out of the weeds sooner. And so a lot of times if you have clear water, you might be more of a sunrise, sunset, low light deal. It might be more of a weed line deal. You're going to have deeper weeds. A lot of times when I find stained water, a lot of times it's over a basin, soft basin. Sometimes, but not always, you don't find panfish to suspend quite as much when the water's dirty and stained. They're more bottom orientated, but those are just rules of thumb. There's, every ecosystem, every fishery's got its own personality as well. You think you figure out something, you think there's maybe some hard line rules in fishing, then you go down the road to another lake at a different time and find out that, you don't know anything some days. And so those are just, just generalities, I guess, that I've seen. But also too, when you are dealing with clear water, it seems like it's a lot more fluorocarbon mono. I can't tell you how many times I love to use braid, and I use braid a lot, especially for walleye fishing. But if you're dealing with really, really clear water, I don't care if it's even like Leech Lake clear or, some of the northern Minnesota lakes that are really clear where you can see down, say 7, 8, 9, 10 feet of water, it's a lot harder to catch fish on braid. You better at least have a long fluorocarbon leader. And I'm even to the point where I'll take a Sharpie and blacken my line just so that I get less contrast even above the fish, so that line doesn't distract them. But use more mono and use more fluorocarbon when you get in that clear water.
Very good.
Excellent.
Thank you. All right, one more question. 7:53 is what I'm seeing. We want to be mindful of your guys' time. Again, we appreciate you taking this opportunity to work with SCHEELS and the audience here and our customer base. Let's see. There's just so many good questions. I feel so bad not asking everything. But the nice thing is that they will get their answers. Let's try to answer this question in a couple minutes. So are there any behaviors of the fish that you need to change bait? So, you're marking fish or following, they drop back down. You change your bait, they mark, they drop back down. What are your recommendations in that situation? I mean, you switch to a finesse bait? Do you need to go to a larger profile, dead stick?
Yep. No, yeah, we encounter those situations, I'd say, almost every day when we ice fish. And, like I said, your Vexler is going to be your mood indicator. I live and die by how fish react to what I'm doing. And all cadences have their own outcome. So when I get fish that come in fast and put the brakes on, they don't bite. What that tells me oftentimes is I'm doing something that they like. They're coming in quick, they're investigating it. When they get close enough, there's something that's turning them off. I think oftentimes a lot of anglers stop the bait too much. They're working the cadence, they're working a fish in, the fish comes in, it gets close to the bait, and they stop. That's, in my opinion, oftentimes one of the worst things you can do. And I'm not saying you need to continue to work a bait hard, but keep moving it. Keep shaking it. Don't let that fish get right in and get sights on that bait. So for one, it's oftentimes before I switch what I'm doing in terms of a presentation, I'll switch up my cadence. And by cadence, I mean my jigging action, how I'm working the bait. I think oftentimes we can change how we fish the bait before we have to change what the bait is. And if I have to downsize, I downsize. A lot of times I'll take my plastic and take a piece off if I get light biting fish, but watch what they're doing. If they come in really slow on the Vexilar, and I mean, you can just see them methodically roll in, you're dealing with a neutral to negative fish to begin with. Then you got to really fine tune your approach. But if I got a fish that comes in hot and stalls out and stops, something you did to seal the deal wasn't right. I oftentimes, where I fish, I'm the type of angler that I'm upsizing even during negative bites. I'm going bigger. I want that fish to take that bait when it comes in off a reaction strike. I'm not the type of angler oftentimes that's going to sit there holding my hand as slow as I can to finesse that fish to bite. I'll move to a new spot or I'll switch holes. I'll drop down and get that first fish to bite. So I think oftentimes it's what we're doing that can change the bite versus, in my box of jigs, what do I tie on next? So change your cadence first before you switch to something else. That'd be my advice.
Yeah, and I think what I would add to that is, what are the fish giving you? Are the fish still accelerating? Are they still climbing? If they are, then you can win those battles usually. A lot of times what you have to do is look at where your line's at. And what I mean by that, I don't care if you're using a spinning reel or a spooler reel, whatever it is your line's got a lifespan, okay? And when your line's brand new, it's going to hang and you're still going to get that jig to turn when you stop with it. Matt said it, you can't just stop that jig a lot of times. What happens is you're working that lure aggressively, and as soon as it stops, it's going to want to turn. And if the line's built up some twist from catching some fish or from fishing hard all day, it's going to turn really fast. You can't catch fish that way. And so what happens is your line gets twisted up during the day, you get fewer and fewer moves. It's like playing one of those Nintendo games when you're a kid, when you're like boxing somebody, but you can only push the one button. Okay, you can't push all 5 buttons anymore, and you get beat. That's what happens during the day. Is your line gets twisted up, is you only get a couple moves left. You can only pound that jig hard to keep it from spinning and get that fish to jump up and accelerate and burst. And as soon as you have to bob it and stop it and just kind of let it roll and let it stop, you can't do those moves anymore as your line gets twisted up. And so you got to see where you're at with your line. Okay, if your line's twisted up, you don't have as many moves. And if you get that fish to accelerate, usually just keep them climbing, keep them stepping. And sometimes you get a fish that's just playing games with you. See if you can keep that fish around and see if you can keep that fish high. And a lot of times, as soon as the second or third fish shows up, then it'll eat. Okay, so sometimes it's just a matter of, okay, if you don't want to play, fine, bring your friends to me, because of those friends, you know what I mean? Because it's funny, you see it on the camera all the time. That fish is just, it's not cooperating, and all of a sudden another fish comes in, and it's like a light switch where that fish completely changes that. Well, you're not going to eat this. I've been staring at this for 5 minutes. Boom, they shoot forward to make you look good. And so sometimes it's a matter of getting the fish up high and keeping them up there to keep bringing more fish that want to play. And the other thing too, though, is if you're fishing and trying to work and trying to bring a fish in, and you can see fluttering on the edges of your cone angle, and that's the beauty of Vexilar, is you start to see that flutter in the bottom. That bottom flutters, but you never get a fish to separate from it. You've got fish skirting the edge of your cone angle where they're coming in 4 or 5 feet away. And, I'm just not in the mood for that. Well, then you know to dead stick. Okay, so when you get fish that you just cannot get to come in, that you do anything and they just go right back down the bottom. If they go down to the bottom fast and they're small marks, small fish anyway. Small fish act differently than big fish anyways. You don't want to fish for small fish. I'm talking, like 4-inch perch, whatever, a 6-inch walleye. Those fish dart around, act differently than what you're after. But when you get fish that are just coming in on the edge of the cone angle, dead stick. And then the other thing that I've seen, one of the toughest bites ever in my mind, is when you're marking all kinds of fish and none of them want to hit, and then 1 out of 10 just comes in and eats it. And okay, well, now imagine if you've been going through your tackle box and changing things, you say you put on a rattle bait, big and bold, and start fishing, and all of a sudden a fish comes up 2-3 feet and nails it. Then, now I'm onto a pattern, right? You drop back down, you can't catch 4 or 5 more fish. Then you switch to a dead stick and you catch one. I mean, those are the toughest bites. And sometimes I think what happens just from watching these fish on a camera is like these fish were at point A and the environment changed and those fish are moving. So now they're going to point B. and you're in their way. You're on their route. It's like geese migrating in the sky. You can't get them to come down and look at decoys, right? They're just migrating. It's almost like fish do that sometimes, where you just see this wave of fish, and you'll see their body postures, or their fins are tight to their bodies, and they're just going from point A to point B, and it's almost like you're invisible. Doesn't matter what you do. They're just swimming on by, like, you know, and all of a sudden one of them comes swimming by and his fins are up, and you can tell by as soon as you see the fish that it's going to bite, because it has a completely different posture. It doesn't matter what you're doing, it just eats. And it's a percentage thing, or 1 out of 20 is like that, or 1 out of 30. And those are the toughest bites that really screw up your head. And you just have to understand what's happening. And so, you know, a lot of it's a process of elimination. You try one thing, if that doesn't work, you try something else until you know, what's the saying? You catch 2 fish, that's hopefully a pattern. So
Some people I think would just be excited to catch 2 fish. So
well,
that's why
I've
they
had
did
days
it.
where it caught less than that. I mean, I've had a lot of tough days ice fishing over the years, I can tell you that.
Yep. Very good. Well, guys, it is 8 o'clock. It looks like we do have a winner, and this winner is going to receive a complete setup from Clam, including a Clam X600 thermal ice hub and the accessories, a parka bibs, plus rods, reels, and tackles. So it's a fantastic prize package, and I'd like to announce the winner, who is Heather P. from Shakopee, Minnesota, if I pronounce that correctly.
All right. That's
so congratulations, Heather, and very excited for you, and appreciate you guys tuning in. I want to thank Jason and Matt for you guys taking your time again. I know it's probably not difficult to get you guys to talk about ice fishing, because it's a huge passion for you.
That went quick.
It's insane how fast it went, and I'm telling you, there's so many questions. So please,
Yeah, and we're gonna spend some time and answer those questions.
I really appreciate that.
Pages and gang up on it. So
very good. And so Heather, we will reach out to you and get a hold of your contact information and get this prize package figured out. Again, tomorrow night we've got another one. We've got Sam Sobey and Jason Mitchell coming back to us. So we appreciate you guys. Please make sure you're registering at scheels.com/ice series. I apologize for saying / and I want to thank the video team for setting me up on that one. Thanks, guys. Next thing is that we're going to see you guys all again. Really appreciate you guys following Scheels Outdoors on social media. There's a lot of good content that's coming out, and it's going to be coming out with everybody coming up here for the Virtual Ice Series. So with that, thanks, guys. If you want to say your parting words, and we'll wrap it up.
Thanks for everybody. This is a neat event, and we'll be on tomorrow. So.
Yep. Thank you. Really enjoyed it. And like Jason said, we'll hammer down on the questions and, you know, do our best to get through them, and let's have a great ice fishing season.
Absolutely. 'Tis the season. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuned in tonight too.